Several organizations are trying to protect and restore salmon populations around the world, and one of them is NASCO, the North Atlantic Salmon Conservation Organization. NASCO is also responsible for that 2019 is the International Year of the Salmon. Therefore, we are very happy that they are here to tell us more about their efforts. Welcome to the stage, Sarah Robinson.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me here today. I'd first like to talk a little bit about what NASCO is, and then the status of salmon, the wild Atlantic salmon across the whole of the North Atlantic, and then tell you a little about IYS. So the Convention for the Conservation of Salmon in the North Atlantic Ocean, so prior to the 1960s, the exploitation of salmon in the North Atlantic was at a national level. And the development of distant water fisheries at West Greenland and northern Norwegian Sea, catching salmon from a mixture of different home waters or stocks in the different areas, meant that rational management of the stocks could only be achieved through international cooperation. In comes NASCO. So the convention was adopted in January of 1982 and came into force in 1983. And in 1984, NASCO arrived, and that's who I work for now. The Secretariat's based in Edinburgh. And we support the 6 parties who are currently signed up to delivering the convention. The whole premise behind it is the rational management, conservation and restoration of wild North Atlantic salmon. So we carry out the work. How do we do this? It's generally through a number of resolutions, agreements, guidelines that address the principal areas. So the fisheries, habitat, aquaculture, and NASCO parties have developed these resolutions and agreements together and agree to abide by them. Now, we've implemented various measures over the last 3 decades, and the work of the parties to implement these at home in their jurisdictions is done through implementation plans, and each jurisdiction reporting on those implementation plans annually. So that's a very quick overview of how NASCO works and why we exist. One of the main reasons we exist is these 2 graphs here, which are fairly shocking. On the right of the slide, you can see the salmon abundance at sea. So that's the millions of salmon at sea, and the decline over the last 30 years that we've seen. At the same time, and since the formation of NASCO, the exploitation rate and the over-exploitation rate principally has been reduced thanks to the agreements, resolutions and coming together of parties around exploitation of salmon at sea. So we can see the exploitation rate has been reduced. This is a very positive thing in terms of overfishing, but at the same time, the abundance continues to decline. So it's a fairly sort of frightening picture when you think of it like that. Even though we're reducing the salmon harvest hugely, we're still seeing a great reduction in the abundance of salmon at sea. So NASCO exists to try and rationally manage at sea, but what we're doing is also trying to look at what the situation is in the rivers. And every 5 years, the jurisdictions of NASCO submit information about how the stock in their rivers, in each individual river, is doing in terms of what level they believe they're at, in terms of health and in terms of numbers. So to explain this slide, each of the dots is the mouth of a river. And the colour of the dots relates to the salmon stock classification according to the assessment undertaken in the country. So the blue dots are unknown, they've yet to be classified, they've yet to be assessed, but there's a sort of traffic light system for the others. So we've got salmon stocks that are at high risk in red, moderate risk in sort of orangey, low risk in yellow, and not at risk in green. We've also got black dots, which are where the salmon stocks have been completely lost, and grey dots where the salmon stocks are artificially sustained. Now, only 3% or almost 3% of salmon stocks in rivers are considered not to be at risk. And the pie chart here has taken away the unknown rivers, which amount to about 35% of rivers across the whole of the North Atlantic. But you can see that the picture's not brilliant, and the majority there is red, so the majority of stocks are at high risk at the moment. And if you group together the low, moderate and high risk, we've got 62% of stocks assessed at some level of risk, and that's around and across the whole of the North Atlantic. That's approximately 2,500 rivers draining into the North Atlantic, each of the stocks on each of those rivers. So to give you an idea of the Atlantic, I've, through the magic of technology, pushed continents together, and you can see the mainly blue section over here. This is North America. We've got a single dot up here, which is the one river in Greenland. But this shows the coastline of Canada and the States, and then many people will be more familiar with the outline of Europe and Norway there. So you can see the picture. There's areas of northern Russia and in Canada where there's quite a lot of unknowns, and that's where the majority of unknown or unclassified rivers are. But you can see also that the situation in America here, quite a high proportion of the rivers, I think there's only 3 classifications in North America where you have artificially sustained, lost or high risk. They don't actually have any rivers not at risk, and they classify salmon, salmon appear on their Endangered Species Act. So they're doing lots of proactive work to support the restoration of salmon, as are many countries around the whole of the North Atlantic. And I think the resolutions and guidelines that NASCO produce are certainly supporting that improvement in wild stocks, in habitat for those wild stocks and management of them. But this is the rivers database information. Most of this data was supplied to us in 2016, so there may be slight changes between then and now. And most of this data is going to be put into a report called the State of North Atlantic Salmon Report, which is what NASCO are producing this year, which is the focal year for the International Year of the Salmon. Now, given all of this information, and given the many talks you've had, I'm sure you're all aware that there's a need to highlight the challenge that we face with managing salmon and bringing them back and improving their status. And so this is how the International Year of the Salmon has come about. And I'll show you a quick film just now by a man who's far better at talking about nature and introducing issues than I am. And then I'll give you a bit more information about the International Year of the Salmon.
The salmon is the king of fish. Their journeys up rivers are some of the most thrilling spectacles in the natural world. And yet, now, their very survival is at risk. They hatch in rivers and small streams, and after a period in fresh water, descend to the sea and migrate thousands of miles across the ocean to their feeding grounds. Here they feast and grow to maturity before returning after 1 or more years, battling upstream to the stretch of the rivers where they hatched. Here they spawn and produce the next generation. But now the survival of these astonishing fish is at risk. Dams blocking their rivers, over-exploitation, pollution of the water, the spread of parasites, diseases, and fish escaping from open-cage salmon farms, all these, together with the inevitable effects of climate change, are threatening their very survival. The International Year of the Salmon will help us kickstart efforts to reduce man-made impacts, restore their habitats, and so ensure we don't lose the king of fish forever.
Okay, so as you will have seen from the footage there, the International Year of the Salmon is a hemispheric initiative. So we're working with the Pacific, and our partners in the Pacific are the North Pacific Anadromous Fish Commission. And the whole idea for the IYS was the thought of a Pacific salmon scientist called Dick Beamish, who sort of came up with the idea in the first place. And NASCO and MPAFC have come together basically to promote and support the initiative that we hope, as the video showed, that, you know, many of the challenges facing salmon are influenced and caused by us, and we can make that change. So we're looking at how we can bring people together to hopefully support the conservation of salmon. Now, just last year we launched the IYS because this year, 2019, is the focal year. So various leaders, political, community leaders came together across the Northern Hemisphere and announced that 2019 would be the International Year of the Salmon. And we've had amazing political support. It's been brilliant. We've been really impressed by the number of jurisdictions that came together. At least 14 out of the possible sort of 17 across the North Atlantic made some sort of announcement. And that launched the IYS. And I wanted to say that, it doesn't quite fit on there, that it's something that is a hemispheric initiative, but it's being delivered at a local level, and it's an opportunity for you to raise the profile of your projects or your activities and projects you wish to do in the future that are related or specifically directed at salmon. So it can be the habitat improvement of a river, it can be some sort of discussion around a dam, and there's an IYS website that exists where you can register any projects and events that you may be undertaking, and this is a great way to see what's happening around the Northern Hemisphere, maybe be inspired by some of the events that are taking place, but also add yourself to this. And we've developed a number of different resources that you're able to download and use freely if you're undertaking projects that support the conservation of wild Atlantic salmon. And so all of that's available through the website. At a North Atlantic level, we're trying to encourage engagement. We're hosting a photo contest, and we encourage you all to enter any amazing pictures you have of North Atlantic salmon. Because we recognise how powerful imagery is, and we need to improve the imagery we have and use that to sort of promote the species and let a wider audience know, and the general public know, just how wonderful it is. Lastly, I'll just mention the symposium that will be taking place. NASCO have an annual meeting, and ahead of this year's annual meeting, which is being hosted by Norway in Tromsø, there'll be a 2-day symposium. And this is all about managing Atlantic salmon in the changing environment that we live in. It's open to all. Everybody is very welcome to attend, and we'd encourage you to come along. The symposium is structured under 2 main themes. So we're looking at climate change in the state of salmon, with scientific overviews being provided on these subjects, but we're also looking at management challenges and solutions and perspectives from a number of different viewpoints, including managers and scientists and NGOs and Indigenous people will be brought to this symposium, which the conclusions of which are going to go forward to NASCO and hopefully inform any future resolutions and guidelines that are created for the support and restoration of the species. So we encourage anyone to come along, but also very much encourage all of you to engage with the International Year of the Salmon. Thank you.
Thank you. It's quite depressing, actually, what you say, the situation. But do you see any, as we say in Sweden, lights in the tunnel?
Definitely. There's been some amazing local specific actions that, I mean, things like the liming of rivers in Norway has seen a brilliant return of salmon there, and a dam removal in, there's dam removals in France, in the US, in Denmark, all having a very positive effect on salmon habitat, and in some cases seeing remarkable returns of salmon runs. So you can make a difference, despite what is quite a worrying picture.
What do you think is the most important when it comes to restore the salmon stocks?
Yeah.
I mean, there are local differences between the countries, but what is the most important thing?
It's so difficult to pinpoint a stressor because of the migration of the fish and the way they live and how they are so specific to local rivers. What influences them is vast. There's a huge number of stressors. So I think there are cases where targeted stressors have had very positive, removal of a stressor has had a very positive impact on the stocks of salmon in a river. But sometimes it's multiple stressors. And I think improving the habitat can only help. And I think that's one of the big things that we can probably do.
What do you think about Sweden? Have you seen any good initiatives from Sweden so far?
I've heard about wonderful initiatives in the Baltic, but unfortunately we don't cover that area. I think what I have taken heart from yesterday was the willingness to cooperate and the interest in cooperation around delivering results for salmon, which is, or fishing, which is the only way given the multiple stresses and the multiple impacts and therefore the multiple people that influence the state of the stocks.
So you have any hope for us in Sweden?
Yes. Yeah, you have to have hope.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, wait.
Oh.
Some chocolate.
Ah, thank you.
And a box with small salmons that you can eat.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much. Micke, du får inga för du drog över tiden.
Thanks.
Vi ska se, har vi någon tittarfråga? Eller lyssnarfråga? Publikfråga.
Hallå?
Ja, du hörs.
Ja, jag hörs. Ja. Okej. Det kommer en publikfråga som förvisso var riktad till Mikael Frodin förut, men den är ganska relevant för nu har vi sett lite tråkiga exempel på skärmen här. Och den publikfrågan som kom, det var: kan sportfiskare också påverka laxbestånden negativt? Vi står ju här och pratar fisketurism och sen kommer sådana här tråkiga filmer. Då känner man vi ska utnyttja den här resursen som sportfiskare. Det kanske blir du som får svara på det.
Den
som
kan jag svara
där.
på,
Ja.
Självklart. Jag har haft många föreläsningar för fiskeklubbar och de säger, en del har velat slänga ut mig när jag pratar om deras effekt på fiskbestånden. Då säger de, det går inte att fiska bort fisken med spö. Det är det dummaste jag hört. Om man dödar en lax med en fluga så är den lika död som man dödat den i ett nät. Va? Enkelt. Så att vi måste ha vad mycket pratar om, älvspecifik förvaltning. Sportfisket måste regleras. Man kan ta en, ursäkta uttrycket, idiotregel, en lax per dag person. Det dummaste jag har hört. Det går ju inte. Utan man får ha en kvot som sätts, som skruvas på varje år för varje älv. Självklart. Och det har vi inte i Sverige. Det är pinsamt. Vi måste dit. Vi går på nästa punkt. Var det svar nog? Har du en fråga till? Värst för alla vill dra över på tiden. Det var en väldigt snabb fråga då.
I got a question for Sarah. I'm Claes Bogart from the Baltic Salmon Fund. Do we know, or do you know, why it's such a decrease in returning salmon, particularly in Scottish rivers? And do you know do you see any possibility of solving the problem?
In Scotland, excuse me, just last year there was a couple of inquiries in Parliament about aquaculture, and the recommendations from those inquiries were very positive. And I think the hope on the West Coast, certainly where salmon stocks are most impacted by aquaculture through sea lice or escapes, we're hoping that the management of aquaculture in Scotland will improve following these reports and the agreement that there's an issue. How that plays out and how that's implemented is yet to be seen, but I think so far it's being seen as a very positive thing for improving salmon stocks in Scotland.
Thank you, Sarah. Ja, då ska vi gå vidare till